Good day to you viewers, the Colonel speaking to you live from the Preceptory for British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting, and we're on another of the Squire Rambles on. Good afternoon, Squire.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Good afternoon, everyone.
Been an exciting day, hasn't it?
Well, it certainly has.
We've been out looking, viewers, at some of the recent acquisitions made here at the Preceptory. I don't mean all the records. What did you think of the giant Aeolian Vocalion then, Squire?
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen anything like it before.
That makes two of us.
God, it really is huge. Well, what's it? 3 feet, metre square, something like that?
3 foot square,
3 foot
yes.
square, yes. Huge thing.
And the horn's 3 foot long.
Yes, yes indeed.
And a magnificent cabinet, but I just do not know what it's all about.
It must be very... I know that Aeolians did make some quite unusual instruments, but I haven't seen one like that, either by that company or any other.
No, I haven't. I don't really understand the purpose of it.
It's so awkward, it's so awkward and ungainly. It wouldn't be easy to even use.
No.
Because it's the wrong height.
Well, it is in a lot of ways, yes. It's almost, I thought perhaps it was used on a stage.
Well, the thing is, it's chair height really, isn't it?
It is.
Sitting down. You think it might be in a public building, well then people would want to walk up to it and sort of a higher instrument.
Unless it was for sort of concerts or something like that, I don't know.
Possibly.
But in those days they had live music, literally live music.
Well, exactly. No, it's a superb piece of work, there's no doubt about it. But still only a double spring motor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd have think they'd get a 4-spring job or something like that.
And it's just before the EMGs, so it's sort of what, 1920 or so, maybe slightly earlier. And they could have put an electric motor in it, but presumably if it was being moved about in a big public building, it wouldn't be near an electric supply.
Well, that's very possible, isn't it? Because there were plenty of buildings that didn't have electricity then.
I would have thought, well, you know, all but a few didn't have electricity. So I don't really understand what it was for. And of course it's not on casters, so not easily moved about. Never had casters.
On 8 legs.
On 8 legs, yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was designed to look rather like one of those harpsichords or square pianos or something like that.
It does have a certain similarity, there's no doubt about it.
But I did wonder if it was designed for those tests for the Gramophone magazine, the Caxton Hall tests.
Possibly.
But I think they tested ordinary machines at those tests, not sort of giant things like that.
No, I know what you mean, because if somebody wanted the length of horn, you thought they'd have had an external horn gramophone. That would have been the easiest answer.
Which is, yeah, but they put it in a large cabinet, which is very odd. Very odd indeed. The Squire's been looking at some of the other machines I've found as well.
Yes, a few surprises to be seen, my word.
Very surprises, yeah, very surprising, yes. Dear, oh dear. But it's been a bit of a surprising time. What do you think about the I'm going to sound here like some sort of 1950s interviewer, Robin Day. I should be wearing a bow tie. What do you think of the political situation, Squire?
Which particular?
Well, it's all going a bit strange, isn't it?
It's going a bit squiffy, isn't it, really? Yes.
Well, it depends on your point of view. If you're one of these neoliberal types who have ruled this world for the last 50 years and basically not done much for ordinary people, then it's absolutely dreadful, apparently.
Well, the thing is, we've had 2 fairly exciting things happen this year. We've had the referendum, of course, on membership of the European Union, and the recent election in America with Donald Trump as president. Each one of those is going to stir things up considerably.
Well, what amazes me is an awful lot of very clever people said he couldn't possibly win.
Well, those are famous last words, aren't they?
They are.
They're famous last words. You hear this all the time, and then it's like these opinion polls. They really are a total waste of time, because they'll predict one thing and then exactly the opposite will happen.
Well, they've got a 50-50 chance most of the time.
Of course they have.
And the recent ones, have been doing pretty poorly. And the thing is, you think, well, why have all these companies and organisations been paying all this money out for what is essentially a toss of a coin?
Exactly. But I think regarding the general situation, both on the European Union and the American situation, I think it's going to make life very, very interesting.
Well, it is. I think it's going to be rather positive in some ways. We've had a political elite that have done very little for ordinary people. Very rich people have done very well, particularly in America, but also over here. And everyone in the middle has been, you know, squeezed, to say the least.
There's an awful lot of chatter always about anything like this. I mean, as a general rule, I neither like or trust any politician. To be quite truthful, in my view, they're all as bad as each other. And I tend to not listen to anything that I hear. Really, I think it's one of those questions. It goes back to that old saying: "Believe nothing of what you hear, and only half of what you see."
Yes.
And I tend to think, well, let's wait and see what happens. It's no good. To my mind, it's no good panicking as to what Donald Trump is going to do or not going to do. We're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Exactly, but one thing is, he's not a politician. He's a businessman.
Exactly.
Now, all right, he may have run a few businesses into the ground, and some of them may have been a bit odd, and some of the things he said has been a bit odd, to say the least. But, you know, is it an act? A bit like Boris Johnson. He comes across as a complete idiot, but in fact, he's now Foreign Secretary. So he's not that stupid, is he?
Well, to be honest, I'm really rather looking forward to see what actually happens.
Yes.
Because I don't think it'll be too bad, to be quite honest. A lot of people are panicking. A lot of people are panicking over the Europe situation. But most of the ones who are making the most noise are the ones with the most to lose.
Absolutely. The
ones who are sort of creaming it off, basically.
Doing very nicely, thank you, and don't like their little apple cart being turned over.
Exactly, very true.
Unfortunately, they always support democracy until it doesn't go their way.
And then it's we've got to find out. We know. Then it's a question of, well, we'll have as many votes as necessary until we get the vote we want, which is
exactly. You know,
right.
That's not the way it's done. It's not a question of best of three.
No, and nobody was coerced. I mean, everybody had a free referendum on the European question, and of the people that voted, the majority voted to come out of Europe. Well, let's grasp the nettle and get on with it. I mean, I think if I was in charge, I'd have done what Ian Smith did in the 1960s in Rhodesia, and say, right, unilateral declaration of independence. Let's get on with it.
Exactly. I have a feeling they should have done that here, really.
Turn the taps off of all the money being led from this country going into Europe and put it into things in this country.
Sack all the MEPs.
And get
We've done very little
over here.
Sack all the Eurocrats and civil servants. Sack a lot of them. They've done nothing but harm.
Well, there you are. I think, to be honest, that's another situation which I'm fairly optimistic about. I think. You see, the point is, the thing is, the whole idea of the Europe question went wrong for me when the common market was finished.
Yes.
You see, years ago, it was what we went in originally was the common market, which was a thing for trade and culture, sort of trade and culture.
Well, that's the way it was sold, certainly, yes.
Exactly, and that, as it was in my opinion, was a good idea, because if you get people talking, if you get people trading, you're not going to have too many problems. But when it comes to complete political, legal, monetary, economic union, then it ceases to be friendship and comes more to being enforced. Well,
it's very slowly and gradually turned into something rather different. I think they had that outcome from the beginning, but they just didn't sell it like that.
Well, they were all, as far as I'm concerned, I'd have hung a lot of them as traitors. To be quite honest. I really would have done, because they didn't do what they should have done. They were very deceptive. We should have known. People should have known more clearly what was happening. And of course, they made a mistake, because originally what they should have done was to have held a referendum before it was even considered going into the common market back in the 1960s. I mean, I remember the 60s when it was all the talk. What's going to, Europe this and Europe that. Well, people should have had a referendum then. I mean, the one we've just had now, we should have had then.
Yes.
Then people could have made up a decision as to what to do. The time when we did have the referendum in 1974, we'd only just gone into it. And people hadn't had time to see what the situation was like.
The trouble is, with this referendum, Cameron and co didn't think they could lose, so there was no planning whatsoever beforehand.
Well, you see, the point is this. Let's put it simply. Let's say I want to go and buy something. I want to buy a car. Now, let's say I need to get a bank loan. Okay, I might go to a bank and say, will you lend me so much money to buy a car? Now, I'm expecting a yes or no answer.
Yes.
Now, I want a yes answer. I've got to have a plan in hand if I'm told no.
Yes.
Which would mean probably going somewhere else. But it's no good asking a question for a yes or no answer and not being prepared in either eventuality.
Well, I suppose a farming metaphor might be you can't expect a crop next spring if you haven't planted it this year.
Well, precisely. But to call a referendum in the first place, when they hadn't got any plan for an exit strategy if the vote went against their ideas.
Well, they hadn't a plan for what the staying in strategy
either.
They had no plan. They thought, we've won the Scotch referendum by frightening people about the financial situation, we'll try that old trick again. Well, it didn't work because people didn't believe what they were told.
The point is, what they mustn't forget, and people abroad mustn't forget this, particularly in Europe, is this: that people in this country are not easily frightened.
No.
If they start trying to scare people, then people take up the cudgels and start saying, come on, we're not having this.
No, indeed.
And you see, okay, European Union, well, if we get out of that, we can then trade with the entire world.
Absolutely.
We're not tied to Europe, we've got the entire world we can trade with. So that's partly my view on that one.
And then, you start off with David Cameron, who was pretty useless, to say the least. Describing UKIP and its supporters as clowns and loonies. Well, he's gone. It could be Lord Farage by the time this video is on YouTube, and he could be the British ambassador to America. Now, I should have put a tenner on that with the bookies, because I'd been even richer than I'm not now.
No.
Who would have believed that this time last year?
Well, there you are. That's right.
The Chinese have a sort of curse, don't they? May you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
Well, we have interesting times.
We have very interesting
times. And it's going to be jolly different. I remember people 5 years ago when Obama came in, waving their arms in the air. It's going to be salvation for ordinary people in America. These were American people, I hasten to add. What's happened 5 years later? Next to nothing. Ordinary people have suffered. Poor people have really suffered.
Exactly.
And rich have got richer. And he's done very little.
I know, I agree with you.
I don't have anything against him personally. Maybe an American president doesn't have a lot of power. Maybe it's all big business. I don't know. But I think old Trump, who is big business, is different.
I think there will be changes. I think there will be big changes.
Well, look at the people he's chosen so far. They seem to be chosen with the idea of winding up everybody else. I'm not sure that was the entire plan, but it seems to have worked rather well.
I think, to be honest, it's a question. I don't think we've got much to worry about with Donald Trump, to be quite honest. He's a businessman. He seems fairly pro-British anyway, so I think we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But going back to the Europe question, I think it's rather strange that in Russia they did away with the Soviet Union was dismantled and got rid of. Now in Europe they're trying to create another.
Exactly, they're behind the times with this nonsense.
Exactly. Why should we or any other country who has been self-governing have to put up with being told what to do by a lot of bureaucratic idiots in Europe?
Well, this is the trouble. We have a very strange situation where politics being the art of compromise and finance is the art of fiddling the figures, and they've come together in Europe. Italy is ruined. The Italian banks have just basically collapsed, and people have lost tens of thousands of pounds worth of savings. In this country you've got a 40 grand guarantee on any bank account, which is why I've got my money spread, or what little there is, of course, viewers, amongst various different accounts. But over there, they've lost everything. People have lost life savings, and the government have basically said, well, that's it. That's what Europe demands. Well, that's a popular view, isn't it? And Greece, that's finished. Spain, Portugal, they're in trouble.
You see, I think it would be far better, and would have been far better, if all of those countries had been self-controlling.
Exactly.
Because it wouldn't happen, because the trouble is, one size does not fit all.
And that's been the problem.
What would be suitable here is not suitable in Germany or France.
No.
I mean, they were all sovereign countries originally, with making their own decisions, and it's not good for any of them, to be quite honest.
It's old-fashioned politics. It's post-war politics where they thought everything should be together. Well, Russia fell apart.
Exactly.
And is gradually coming back together again with a strong leader. But Europe is ruled by very weak people, and in the German Reich, as I always call it. When I send parcels to Germany, I have to stay my hand for writing Reich on there, because I'm sure their idea has not changed since 1870. They've still got the same idea, and financially they dominate it all. But for how much longer?
Well, that's the point, really, isn't it? But
how long can they prop it all up?
Well, this is the point. I mean, you can't have one country propping the whole lot up. I mean,
and there are French elections soon, and if Marine Le Pen gets in, everyone's saying, oh, it can't happen, but look what's happened in America and here in the last year. It can't happen. It did happen.
Well, it's like people at the time saying the Titanic wouldn't sink.
Unsinkable.
Exactly.
Europe. It's unthinkable. Europe will the EU will vanish. Well, no, it's not.
Nobody can say that something will not happen.
Yes.
Because if they do, they're asking for a problem.
Well, predictions. Well, there's a Game of Thrones quote, isn't there, about predictions? I won't say it. You can look it up, viewers. But it ends nastily. And it's so true. That's the point. A lot of these, cliches are in fact cliches because they're true.
That's right. And that's what I mean. It's no good everybody panicking about things. They've just got to sit there and wait and see what happens.
Exactly, and then you can't predict what's going to happen.
No,
you can't react to events that may never happen.
No, that's right.
You can do a bit of forward planning, which is what Cameron and co should have got up to, but did nothing. They thought, oh, we'll win this one, and halfway through the election, you could see the panic. Halfway through the campaign, you could see the panic on their faces.
Well, in the course of my work, I met David Cameron on 2 or 3 occasions, and I promise you that I was not impressed.
Oh dear. Very mild way of putting it.
Yes. So, interesting times ahead, I reckon.
Yes. What that means, who can tell?
Very much so.
But it's going to be different. The political elites have got to wake up to the fact that they're not actually in charge anymore.
No. Well, I think really with the Brexit vote, I think it woke up a lot of people to possibilities.
Well, the trouble is with populism is you can unleash forces that you can't control. Mrs. Thatcher did that in the early 80s, and some of the outcomes for a lot of people were not that great.
No.
And it could be the case here. You have to be very careful unleashing populism, and that's what they're saying we've got now. I'm not quite sure it's that bad, because things aren't like the 1930s, although they could very well be in Europe at some point. Maybe not for the Germans, but for the Greeks it's ain't good, for one thing.
I think the problem always lies is when ordinary people have a problem and can see a problem developing. Now that can take many forms. There are many things I could mention, but I won't at the moment, which will, in my view, cause a problem in the future. They go to their MP or their council. They say, look, what are you going to do about this? And then the usual answer is something like, oh, we'll look into it, and nothing happens.
Yes.
And they're then actually told, you've got to put up with it. And then what do they do next?
Exactly.
Then it's up come the fists and the cudgels start, because nobody listens. And that's what people in authority have got to realise, is they've got to listen to the people.
Yes.
It's an interesting question, really, but I think that a lot of trouble is caused by people in high positions not listening, and I think this referendum vote was an example of what will probably happen again in the future if they don't get on with it.
Well, I think an awful lot of the problems that have happened, the referendum and everything, stem from the Blair government, which did very little thinking, an awful lot of waffle, and they've dropped a lot of people in the cart, sadly.
Yes,
they didn't think. They didn't get on. They just thought, we know best, we'll do this, that and the other, unlimited immigration, all this sort of thing, without thinking about schools and hospitals and houses and all the rest of the things.
You see, that's the point. You've mentioned immigration, which is an interesting question. These people, a lot of these people are having an absolutely terrible time in their own country. I don't deny that.
No.
I mean, what's going on in Syria and places like that
horrific.
It's appalling. But what should the United Nations and things like people like that be doing? They should be sorting that problem out.
The only person who is Vladimir Putin, and the fact is he knows that the West do a lot of talking and very little else, whereas he acts first and gets on with it.
Well, the point is, as I say, it's no answer, in my opinion, it's no answer bringing people over here because we haven't got the resources to cope with it.
No.
You see, it's all right everybody flapping, but have we or have we not got a housing crisis? Have we got a crisis in the schools where they can't, haven't got enough capacity? What about the health service? Is that in surplus? No, I don't think so.
And the fact is, all these loony, lefty, liberal people who are actually quite wealthy live in lovely, gracious houses, and they don't want a new school nearby or a new hospital. Oh, it'll be terrible. You've got to think about the green economy. You've got to think about the countryside. Yes. So which do you want? And I think that they should do the difficult thing, which is rebuilding the countries where the problem is, so that people don't have to travel. They can rebuild their own country. But that's expensive. That's long term, and politicians don't want to think about that.
Well, the problem is, as I see it, it's what you're doing really is you're offering a lot of people false hope.
Yes.
Because they will come over here and they're doing a lot of them are being helped at the moment. But the problem is we haven't got the resources to cope with it. I mean, if they get a lot of people coming, where are they going to be housed?
Again, another case of no forward planning.
You see, the point is this, is if you've got excessive demand for something, housing in particular, and there aren't enough houses to go round, and there are not enough houses to go around for our own people, let alone migrants, there are two answers. One is you reduce the number of people, or secondly, you build more houses.
Yes.
And that's to cope with our own people. How can one be expected to cope with so many coming in from overseas who'd obviously need help? I don't deny that, but it's a question of logistics, really.
Well, the fact is, when they build new houses, they're very rarely affordable homes, aren't they? They're usually gracious executive homes.
Well, the point is where housing is concerned, I still am of the opinion that what needs to happen is there's got to be a completely new approach over housing, and they talk about affordable housing. Well, how can somebody who's got very little money sort of afford a house that's hundreds of thousands of pounds? It can't happen. What they've got to do, and somebody's got to wake up to this, is to build a basic property, probably a prefab or something like that, which they would sell for a set amount of money. Let's say, for example, they sold it for £80,000. Well, that might give people a chance to get somewhere to get started. The idea would be that a couple would buy a house like that, and then when they've paid for it and made some money, they could move on and buy somewhere bigger.
Yes.
But the important thing is that place needs to be sold for the money it was originally bought for.
Yes.
Because it is no good when it's sold. It would be the £80,000 house would probably be 150,000.
Yeah, and that's the trouble.
And how the heck can anybody keep up with it? They can't.
That's the problem.
You've got to have some starter homes at a basic price, comfortable. I'm not saying they need to be like tin sheds or anything like that.
No.
But have a place that people can buy, build up their funds, move on, somebody else can move into them.
That is the problem, you see. In the past, you'd get a job and you'd hope for a promotion. And within 5 years, you'd hope to be earning a lot more. Nowadays, most people get a job and they're still earning the same, if not, a few years later. And they therefore expect their house to do all the earning, extra to make the difference up.
But then but that's fair enough. I mean, once one's moved out of that first house, yes, fine. But how are you going to get people in on the housing level if the properties are too expensive and they haven't got the money to do it anyway? That's the problem.
Once people are on the ladder, they think I'm all right, Jack, don't they?
Well, that's the point. But I think there's got to be some basic housing for people to move into build up their funds, move on, and then the price is the same. Then other people have a chance, because otherwise I can't see that it will work.
The thing is, post-war council housing was the answer. It worked very well. Decent, respectable working people had council houses. Unfortunately, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of liberal, loony, lefty people got in on council, shoving any old Tom, Dick or Harry, with a job or not. Now, I fully accept that people without jobs need houses. But council houses were very strictly regulated, and suddenly they weren't. But now they've gone back to giving the council houses to housing associations, which are strictly regulated. And, you know, the problem has therefore moved on to somebody else. Because councils are more or less useless most of the time. They don't seem to have any common sense.
No.
And again, we get back to the Blair government with their strange idea of all-day drinking that they brought in. They abolished the licensing laws, and you could be open till midnight or 1 in the morning in these pubs, and that create, you know, say, oh, it's going to be like continental drinking. Well, it may be in Islington or Camden, but it's not in a lot of countries, towns and cities in this country. The people went completely bananas.
Well, there was no need for that. I mean, I've been when I was abroad. These places were open all the time. You never saw any problems like that. It was just complete stupidity.
But it's all about big business again, making a lot of money, and everyone else having to suffer. And of course, no thought going into the basic ideas and where the faults may lie.
Well, no, that's true.
And that's the trouble with government these days. It doesn't seem to have any common sense.
No, that's the trouble with a lot of things. No common sense.
Well, yes, exactly.
It's all books. You find this with quite a lot of people. It's all brains and no sense.
Well, most politicians are professional politicians. I've said this before. In the past, they had proper jobs. You know, in the army, farming, business, whatever. Not just the law, which some of them go into, but nowadays they have no common sense, no appreciation of the real world and how real people have to live and bring up families. That most people just want a decent job where they can earn enough to keep a family in a decent house in a nice area, run a car, maybe have a holiday or 2 a year. Most people want those basics, and that applies in communist Russia or here. But the trouble is, that seems to be quite a difficult thing for a lot of people nowadays. I'm not saying you shouldn't have aspirations, but you know, then they get into huge debt problems.
We see, that's another stupid thing. See, years ago, if somebody went to university, they got a grant to go to university.
Yes, indeed.
Now, they're sent to university and they have to get a loan.
Yes.
Well, what the heck's the good of starting a young person off on a work career with a whacking great debt round their neck?
Well, the problem is, of course, in the days when you had a student grant, you had a fairly small number of people going to university. But part of the government plan to reduce the unemployment lists, probably under the Thatcher government, they started shoving people into university to try and make that look a bit better and give them, and a lot of qualifications aren't worth the paper they're written on, but they should also have a practical qualification. They should do something, have do a job, not just sit there subsidised by mummy and daddy.
Thing is, though, I mean, if anybody's worked as I have in various jobs, the number of people who come out of college, they come to do a job and they absolutely haven't
It's a hell of a shock, usually, isn't it?
Not a clue. They
don't understand the practicalities. They have very little common sense. Some of them can't even read or write properly or add up, and yet they've gone through an educational system to the age of 18 or sometimes 21, and they come out of it little better than they went in.
Well, the problem is the brains are in the computers.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
That's one of the snags. You see, when I was, I know with me talking about what happened when I was at school, but when I was at school, there were obviously no such things as computers or mobile phones. And if anybody went into a maths examination, they weren't even allowed a table book to do. Everything they did had to be up here.
Yes.
Now, I remember bank managers who would look at a sheet, about 4 or 5 columns of figures, go like that, and get the right figure at the
They could add
and
it
was
up.
all done up here.
Yes, I once went for an interview where I was given I had to fill out a sort of questionnaire thing. And I did all the maths things on a bit of rough paper, and I went back to hand the the paper to the secretary, and she said, "Oh, I'm very sorry, we forgot to give you a calculator." I said, "I didn't need one. I worked it. How on earth did you manage? Well, did you guess?" I said, "Of course I didn't guess. I worked it out in my head, and on a bit of scrap paper."
But then that's what happened in those days. People had to do it. People had to do it, and had to do it like that.
Computers,
because the assistance wasn't there. Well, the problem is, in some cases, you've got computers keeping people in jobs where they shouldn't be.
No, often very. I always found in the civil service that the more incompetent you were, you'd be promoted out of the way, so you couldn't do any harm.
I mean, I'll never forget this. I mean, I was never terribly good at maths at school, and I was working at a place, and there had to be quite a lot of quick calculations, and I was given the job of trying to teach this youngster how to calculate how many copies there were on a pallet and all this sort of bit. It was really me having to do that was really comical.
Well, if you've got 10 book stacks high by 10 wide, you can guess what's on the pallet.
Exactly.
You don't need to count every one. You can sort of you can work that out.
Exactly. But this chap was finding it extremely difficult.
It's mad. I always think with maths, I wasn't particularly brilliant, but I know that 20 shillings makes a pound.
Well,
that's good enough for I.
That was the main thing, wasn't it?
Oh dear, oh dear.
Oh, yes.
This is the problem. Yes, it's a sad world. But talking of rustics, as we weren't, I believe you had a very interesting tale. We were playing a copy of the Charleston the other day, and it reminded the Squire of a very interesting story. Why don't you tell that for us, because that's well worth recording.
Well, this goes back 50 years to when I was still on the farm at Haley, and my father was still around, and mother, and we were talking about various things, and I think one of my friends was talking about one of the pop records that had just come out. Oh, in my day, he said it was the Charleston, and this was at a site had to be seen. My mother and father trying to demonstrate how to do the Charleston in Wellington boots in the cow shed. That seems to be believed. Golly, yes.
Dear. And what did those two old rustics say?
Oh yes, well it was in those days the owner of the farm was usually called the master. You see.
There you go, viewers.
The old and these old boys once said to them, where be the master then? He be gone foxtrotting. There was some dance in Witney at the Corn Exchange or something, and the parents gone down. How they gone foxtrotting.
Brilliant
I
stuff.
know, incredible.
Oh dear! And of course, you were addressed as the young master.
At one time, yes.
That must be you must be the last generation to have actually been addressed in such a fashion.
Well, certainly when I was about 10 years old, I used to.
I should point out, viewers, that the Squire was not born in Thomas Hardy's Wessex.
No, indeed.
In the 1850s.
No.
We're talking about the 1960s.
Yeah, that's right.
Not that long
there
ago.
were plenty of old characters around in those days.
Yeah, well, you've seen the Darling. We've said it before, but you've seen the Darling Buds of May, where they have these gymkhanas and point-to-points, and all run by these old colonels. That's not fiction. That's how it actually was.
Well, that Darling Buds of May episode where they have the gymkhana, that is so true. I could almost walk back into that scene now because I remember seeing it years ago.
Yes.
Because I used to go to gymkhanas myself. I was taken to gymkhanas and horse shows in those days, and yes, that's very, very accurate. The whole thing was accurate.
Yes,
Amazing.
I remember going to the Bucks County show at Hartwell House in the 70s. My grandparents and parents, and it was deadly boring. And in those days, we wore short trousers. We didn't wear long trousers, and it was awful. All these corn dollies and other rubbish for sale. It was dreadful. And these cows with sort of huge rosettes on them. I thought, well, one cow looks very much alike to me. And all the old farmers in the beer tent. And you get sort of graduations of the beer tent. You'd have the tenant farmer's beer tent and the landowner's beer tent. And the sort of middle class beer tent where none of the other two would speak to them because they were outsiders. And people think I'm joking, but it was perfectly true. That's what happened.
Yeah, very true.
Farming was a very close-knit thing, and most farmers are actually related to one another. I'm sure they are.
Well, you get into the question of the villages. Yes, indeed, it's different. Obviously, a different ball game today, but certainly in those days, Well, people in a long time didn't go out of the village very to go very far, really.
You don't leave a farm, do you? You don't push off. You know, things have to be done. Animals have to be fed, and
well, if we went to the county show, for example, we had to come back and milk the cows.
Yeah.
The cows had to be milked twice a day, regardless.
They'd probably be outside the shed waiting too.
Yes, exactly. Yes, so if we went out for the day, we had to think, you know, I've got to get back to do the cows.
And people forget that animals, they have individual personalities, and some of the blighters could be quite awkward.
Oh, some of them can be really nasty.
They can.
Oh, indeed, yes, very much so. Oh, vicious things, some of them.
Yes. Yes, awful. There's my cat.
Oh.
Wanting to escape from our cup of tea. Well, it's been good to chat to you again, and yes, indeed, yes, the Squire's here. Yes, he'd come to see you, not me. Yes, unfortunately, viewers, my cat has got fleas and ticks and things, and the treatment costs a fortune, and it's not very effective, I don't think. We'll have to give you some more treatment, Jess. I think I might rub her over with a bottle of scotch, or horse liniment. Well, viewers, hopefully you've enjoyed our chat. We have wandered over many a subject, and we will continue to make these videos regularly. It has been a bit of a break for a few weeks, but we're going to remedy that. Because I keep forgetting the camera when I visit the Squire at home. It's a bit difficult to make a video without a camera. We tried, but it didn't work. So I'm doing a few drawings on paper. But there we are. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you, and goodbye.